All right. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Go ahead and call this meeting of the Board of Water Resources to order. This is our briefing meeting, and then we will have our formal board meeting with action items at 1 p.m. We'll start out, as we usually do, just with introductions for purposes of the record. I'm Juliette Tennert, representing Salt Lake and Tooele. Have the honor of chairing these meetings this year. Let's go ahead and go to our board members who are participating online. Randy, will you please introduce yourself and representation, and then we'll go to Dina.
Randy Crozier, Green River District.
Dana Van Horn, Upper Colorado District.
All right, thank you. And represented here at the board meeting are
Mike Davis, Provo River Drainage.
Kyle Stevens, Weber District.
Charles Holmgren, Bear River Basin.
Blaine Ipson, Sevier River District.
Brian Steed, Great Salt Lake.
all right, thank you. We will note that Spencer Jones is excused. He has some other obligations going on today, so we hope that he will join us as he can. So if he shows up online, we'll make sure that we note that, but he is excused until he can join. So we'll have Candace introduce the staff that are present.
Great, thank you. Can you guys hear me online okay? My mic doesn't sound on.
Yeah.
Oh, you can? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, well, excited to be here today. With us today on our staff is Shalane DiBernardi, Marisa Egbert, Ani Baynard is online, Ethan Stainer, Shawnee White, Carly Payne, Rachel Shilton, Marty Bushman from the AG's office, and then Shannon is taking minutes. Thank you, Shannon, and our awesome AV team in the back, Paul Gedge and Seth Majors.
All right, thank you very much. Maybe it's okay, hopefully with the board, if I take chair's prerogative and introduce a special guest who's joining today. My mom, Susan Tennert, is in from Reno, and so I invited her to see how things work, because we handle water issues in Utah a little differently than they do in Nevada. So I thought maybe she'd take some good tips home with her. So with that, why don't we've got a couple of new staff to meet, and so maybe Candace can share with us those new additions.
That's great, and I'll call up their managers to introduce them. Rachel, do you want to come introduce Carly, and then we'll have Shalane introduce Shawnee.
So this is Carly Payne. You may be familiar with her. She was our administrative assistant in the River Basin Planning section, or the planning branch, sorry. And she has a background in watershed science. So she applied for the Watershed Council Coordinator for the division, and she was hired into that position. So Carly, if you'd like to tell him a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, Rachel already mentioned I have a degree in watershed science from USU. I've been working with the watershed councils for a year already doing administrative support, so it'll be hopefully an easier transition into full-time support. So that'll be exciting.
All right, thank you. Well, welcome into the new role. And it was funny because I saw the name and I thought, wait, is that actually a new person? So we're really glad that you're sticking around and moving to this really important role. Are there any questions, the board? We know where to find you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And this is Shawnee White. It's an interesting spelling. We all like it. S-J-A-A-N-I is Shawnee. We hired her on a time-limited position to cover for Ati. Ati's health problems have kept her out of the office some. And now we've kind of grown really, really attached and don't want to let her go, but we thought you'd like to know if you see her at our front desk. This is Shawnee. Anything you'd like to add?
I'm just happy to be here. It's been wonderful filling in and helping everybody out. and I'm hoping to hopefully become permanent.
That's right. Well, I think we'll like throw our support in for that permanency, and thank you. I know that you handle a lot in that role, so thank you. Questions of the
Thanks, Shani.
board? All right.
Pardon?
Great.
Questions. And I will just note, you will see Carly again later. She is providing a Watershed Council update in your actual board meeting. So, thanks.
And thank you, Madam Chair. One quick go back. Brad Caldwell is also here with us. Sorry, I didn't get you on my list. Thanks, Brad.
It was great to see you. Great to see you, Brad. Thank you. Well, I think maybe we just should go ahead and jump in. So we first look at agenda items, then information to the board. Approval of the minutes is right up front. Are there any things that we need to note going into the meeting on minutes? Okay.
I just have a question or a comment, I guess, on the summary of board actions. Wondered if it wouldn't be wise to make reference to the project number that action references.
Yes. That's a good.
Okay.
Okay.
I hadn't noticed that before, and I didn't know if that was
Okay.
just this particular one or if we'd been doing that in the past. So unless you have the minutes in front of you to compare
Yeah.
back to back, it's hard to determine which one goes with which one.
Yeah. That's a great addition slash catch. I wonder, can we make those changes? Like, when we take action, can we ask for that to be made as part of the action? Is that all right to do? Okay, all right. Kyle, do you mind then just maybe for the record, like stating like approval of the minutes with the addition of the project numbers or something like that? Just
Okay.
in the motion?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's super helpful. All right. Okay, and then we'll have snow report from Claire Stellick. Is there anything that we need to be aware of there? Is Claire, have we met Claire?
I don't believe that you
Okay.
have yet.
Okay.
The snow surveyor is in the process of doing a number of new hires, and
Okay.
Claire's one of them.
Great.
So,
All
yeah,
right.
she's great.
Very good. All right, so moving into feasibility reports, looks like the first one we have is in your area, Charles, King Irrigation Company. Did you want to set this up as Ethan comes to give us the
Sure.
briefing?
Madam Chair, Ethan and a few other folks met with the King Creek folks, and I attended the investigation meeting there, and we'll let Ethan fill us in with the details, and we'll move forward from that.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the board, excited to be here. Yeah, so for King Irrigation Company, yeah, we'll just go right into it.
Thank you.
This project is located in Benson, so just northwest of Logan a little bit. This is the first time that they've applied for funding from the board. They're actually, as part of this, King Irrigation Company is going to combine with Reese Clark Pump and Irrigation Company to create a new service area serving 509 acres with 19 shareholders. So the existing system has 2 pump houses, one for each of the existing companies, and they both pull from a sharp bend in the Bear River that's about 3.5 miles southwest of Smithfield, and pump that into a canal that carries it to their canal system. And so overall, it's an old system. It's unlined canal, and they have some old concrete canal that's kind of deteriorated. And so between that and the flood irrigation, they lose about 35 to 40% of water. And so this will be a great project to pressurize the system and make it uber efficient. So The purpose of the project is to replace 3 miles of that canal with pressurized pipe. And then the 2 existing pump stations will be combined into one at that sharp bend, and they'll have 3 variable speed pumps installed in this pump station. Yeah, canal will be replaced with various sizes of PVC pipe and a new SCADA system. And yeah, will be a lot more efficient, I think. Then the cost sharing. So the board's share will be $960,000. They have a couple grants that have been awarded. They have a Water Smart grant that's $1 million, and they have a UDAF grant. I think that's one of the ag or water optimizations. That's $1.25 million, and then the new King Irrigation Company will be putting in $170. And so the staff recommendation will be that the board authorize 28.4% of the project costs up to $960,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over approximately 18 years with annual payments of $56,000. So, yeah, any questions?
Great, yeah, thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
I have a question or two where Reese Clark's going to be in there also. What we have before us today is only King Irrigation Company, is that correct?
My understanding is that they've combined, and the president of King Irrigation Company is going to be the new president of the combined company, and it will be called King Irrigation Company. And so he will be representing both companies at the meeting.
Okay, that's where I got a little question in my mind. Are we dealing with one entity,
Yeah.
2 entities? When we, as far as they go through the things they have to do with turning over water rights, whose water rights
Yeah.
are they turning over? Have the water rights been updated on both companies and all of those logistical things? As I went through this, I had those type of questions.
Yeah, for sure. And the water rights that are listed in the report are, one of them was from the old King Irrigation, and it looks like there's 3. I remember that one of them was from the old King Irrigation, and one of them was from the old Reese Clark, and so they're all being combined into King. And my understanding is that they have already combined, and if not that's part of their paperwork that they have to give us. So if they haven't already, it will be very soon.
I wonder if just for purposes of the motion and for it to be in the record, we should say something about it being King Irrigation Company representing like the merge of King and Reese Clark. Does that seem like it would give us cover to make sure we're
Yeah, I think so.
okay? Is that okay, Charles, if we did something, if we
I think
specify, or does it even matter?
that in.
Okay.
Yeah. Additionally, these folks have, I would imagine, and it's not listed under water rights, but they have a contract with Pacific Corp for storage water from Bear Lake, I would imagine. I guess we can ask them when they come before the board to.
Yeah, their president, Lynn Egley, is going to be online for that, so he's probably a good person to ask.
My crude math analysis of this, it appeared to me that they would be getting a increased income of almost $392 per acre, which is pretty substantial, but I know they have to purchase a bunch of sprinklers and stuff like that, so it won't be cash in their pockets necessarily.
And Marisa just made note to me that in the report we have, excuse me, we have create and submit an agreement between the 2 companies regarding the operation and maintenance of the system and repayment of the funding.
Oh, so that's probably
that's one
sufficient.
of the committal items.
Okay.
So.
That's probably sufficient then. That's great.
So, Madam Chair, I
Yes.
just read it straight.
I think so. I realizing that, okay, that's great. Yeah, okay.
I will do that.
Okay, yeah, you got
I
that.
had a question regarding the financial feasibility portion of it, where the second paragraph there says, new sprinkler costs for the shareholder are expected to be about 181,000 annually. I just wondered how,
Yeah, yeah.
if that was an annual expense from the standpoint, I looked at it first, just thinking, well, that's your sprinkler cost, but annually would be the electrical pump costs and those types of things. But is that an annual? Your sprinkler purchases of pivots and would be a, one-time fixed cost, but
Yeah.
then there's the ongoing annual cost.
That's a good question. I know they gave us the cost of 2 different shareholders in the system, and we kind of averaged those out, and they gave us an annual cost. And so I assume it includes all the electrical and everything that goes into it, but I'm
Okay.
not 100% on that.
I wonder if it included depreciation costs or something like that. I mean, the pivots that they're gonna put in, I wouldn't think it would cost them that much per year annually.
Yeah.
Their pump station will cost them quite a bit, though, as they're putting in that new pump station.
And then they depreciate that maybe, is that, okay,
Yeah, but it's an ongoing expense.
okay.
So, if I may, Madam Chair, what we do is, we didn't survey every single farmer, but they looked at it, and Tom worked with Ethan on this as well, looked at a couple of farmers, farmers, shareholders, and what they would need to do, and tried to spread that out across the company, per se. And I thought this was going to be, usually we do this where we talk about they're having to get a loan. And so this is a little bit different than I expected. Yeah. And it's hard to determine that, but I don't think it's quite that much. And I'm sorry, I wish Tom were here to help out with that. But typically what we try to do is what would it cost the entire company? And we try to turn that into an annual payment of a repayment on a loan, because they usually have to go get a 12-year, 20-year loan. So to do that through Department of Ag, ARTL, an ARTL loan. So, but we can look into that really quickly after and make sure that we're stating that correctly.
The director has a question.
More of a question of something I want to look into, and I apologize I didn't catch this in my review of the report when it went out. It says the UDAF grant is for $1.2 million, and I believe the maximum they're giving out right now is $1 million. So I want to verify that. I texted Hannah Freeze to get with her before the board meeting so we can get that. So I'll verify that.
Okay, all right. To the board members who are participating online, do you have any questions or comments on this one? All right. Okay.
Hi, this is Randy. I think we want to keep it with King Irrigation because it sounds like they're combining. We don't want to muddy the water.
Thank you, Randy. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. So it sounds like, Charles, you're on board to make the motion as is? All right. Very
Yes, Madam Chair,
All
yes,
right.
I am.
And Madam
go.
Chair, we do have the signed UDAF agreement, so we can look at that and
Okay.
see what's on there. Because I know they initially applied for 500,000, and they found out they could get more, and so they told us they were getting 750 more
I
of
wonder
that.
if
We
it's
can
like
look
in
and
two
see
pots and that makes it.
what that is.
I mean, that could be a way if they applied in 2 different rounds and were combining the funds together. In previous applications period, the max was 500,000. In this last round, the Agriculture Optimization Committee, which I sit on, extended those funds to $1 million for off-farm projects like, canal lining, piping, those type of things, which this would count for. So maybe they applied in 2 different pots, and that's why they have that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I just want to verify that.
It may be important, sorry
Yeah,
for
yeah, please.
jumping in, it may be important to verify that it wasn't under the both companies, that they applied under the different companies.
That potentially is,
And that may be something that is going on.
yeah.
Okay, good point.
Do we end up, I mean, I guess we'll just get this all cleared up before the meeting, but do we end up out of balance on the cost share if that is not at 1.25 million? I'm having trouble doing the math in my head on,
Yeah,
Maybe we can
we'll
sort it out.
verify it.
Okay.
We can look it up in the project
Okay.
folder, and if there's changes, we can make that before the meeting.
all right. Okay, thank you, Ethan and Marisa. All right, I think that she'll, oh, looks.
Shalane just brought us the spreadsheet that's in in the project folder about the sprinkler cost. So if anything, we could possibly show it to you if you want to look through it. Or are you comfortable explaining it at this point?
Might have to look it over more.
Okay. They've got costs down here. It says annual sprinkler cost assessment, and it says it's got the dollar per acre and the percent of total acres. And so like Pivot, it's going to be over 100, just over 100 acres. That's 10,900. Wheel Line is going to be about 400 acres. I wonder, is that supposed to be 18? No. And 400 acres and about 2,675, oh, it's not multiplied out, per acre. And then, so we'll have to look at that. We didn't, here's the weighted calculation. Okay.
Why don't,
So we'll
maybe
look at
just
that
take,
again.
take a look at it,
Yep.
and then as part of the
We'll do that.
presentation, if you could maybe just share the details, that'll be helpful. All right. Thank you, Ethan and Marisa. I think Shalane's coming up to cover for Tom on the next project, which is also in Charles's area, the Wellsville-Mendon Conservancy District. Charles, is there anything you'd like to set this up with? Oh, as we have actually Brad and Marisa.
Okay, good morning, Madam Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh,
Sorry.
oh, sorry, Charles. I didn't realize. I thought
Excuse me,
you were
Madam
looking. I
Chair.
thought you were looking at your notes. I was giving you a minute.
I was, thank you. No, just some questions about their interpretations of their payback period are pretty long,
Okay.
considering what the cost-benefit ratio is. It's a pretty positive return to them, so.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll go through that with
Okay.
Brad and Marisa.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right, Madam Chair and the board. So the proposed project involves enclosing and pressurizing 3.3 miles of upper canal with pipeline diameters ranging from 8 to 36 inches. Pressure grade PVC pipe will be used to tie into existing sections. Meters will be installed at turnouts for precise monitoring. The project targets a reduction of 578 acre-feet per year in water loss due to seepage and system inefficiencies. Transitioning to a pressurized system eliminates the need for private pump stations, leading to energy savings and more efficient irrigation methods. And I know that some of them are flood irrigating, so it'll give them the opportunity to save that way. And then for the cost share, you guys were talking about UDAF, and it looks like they have a 1.5 million UDAF grant as well. And yeah, so I don't know. But the applicant has obtained an agricultural water optimization grant from the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food for 1.5 million. Part of this grant, 500,000 needs to be spent by the end of June 2025. The applicant has also applied for a Water Smart grant from the Bureau of Reclamation, which they have not acquired yet. So I would expect changes during committal. But the staff recommends the board authorize 44.4% of the project cost up to $1,393,000, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1.38% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $111,000, which is including reserves. And that is staff's report. For the cost to benefit ratio analysis, Tom created a spreadsheet showing 2 other projects that they currently have. And a note that in the board meeting, the applicant may ask for, so we're currently at 15 years, they may ask for 20 years in the board meeting, just a heads up there. And then I have this spreadsheet that Tom made. And did you want to explain that?
Yeah.
Okay.
For me.
Yeah.
So just a couple things. The initial request was to go to 20 years because what was said was they have a very large project in the next few years. And so they were wanting to set push out to 20 years to help with that. And they do have to do a bond, so it's not necessarily something, we can't make an amendment like we could with a purchase agreement. So they brought that up. Tom does have some concerns. Tom Cox has some concerns with how Zions did their analysis. Apparently, and Charlie, you can chime in here a little bit. Apparently, they only referenced 1 year of the cost of hay. Is that correct, Charlie? Rather than trying to get an average-ish?
Yeah, well, that was, people in agriculture have found in the last 2 or 3 years, price of alfalfa has gone from $300 a ton to $100 a ton. And so depending on which year they picked to identify as their payback, it's a gigantic fluctuation. And input costs have dropped considerably too in that amount of time. But
So Tom's reached out to Zions to ask them to take at least a few years to come up with an average of the cost of hay. He also asked them, and we're in a little bit different territory. We had Lyle Summers doing this a lot before, and he was an ag guy. And Zions Bank has said, we're not necessarily agriculture people. But what Tom said was, did you include, if they're going to have, a longer season, they're going to have more costs, fertilizer, and so he asked them if they included that. So we haven't heard back. I haven't heard back. Tom copied me. So either they haven't responded or they only responded to Tom. So we're looking into that as well. Just a couple things with this. Based on what Zions gave us, it shows that the company could pay this off in 11 years based on their increased benefit. And yet, as the report states, that we set it at 15 because there's a board policy to give them a minimum of 15 years. So there's already that. And then Tom came up with this sheet that you've got there showing some of all the kind of issues going on with their costs. And again, the benefit cost analysis is based on the one project and what its benefit. And so we try to get from them what the benefit will be of that particular project. As you see on there, they have a repayment of $17,000 currently. That will end in 2026. And as far as I believe they've been making all their payments, I didn't look it up, but we haven't heard otherwise. So that $17,000 will not, they won't be having to pay that anymore. Then they've got the larger one that will go until 2041. And one thing, if you'll look down, it says where he's got some text. If phase 1 is constructed late 2024 to early 2025, and phase 2 constructed in late 2025 to early 2026, the first principal payment for this project, RE 478, wouldn't be until January 2027. So they're not even going to have a first principal payment until a few years out. And as you note, again, that $17,000 goes away the year before for them. It says payments previously paid to RE 338 could be rolled into the new RE 478 payment. And for a future project to pipe the lower canal, payments, so this is what they came with was, we've got this huge project in a few years. And so that's what Tom's talking about here. For a future project to pipe the lower canal, payments could be lower for that future project until RE 376 and RE 478 are paid off in 2041. And if we go with 15 years, this project will be paid off in 2041. And so we could reduce the costs and then balloon them at 2042. It says, and then increase to roll those payments in. So come 2041, 17,000, 41,000, and 111,000 will all be off their books and could be part of the payment for this future project. So does that, hopefully that makes sense.
So just to clarify, or maybe repeat back to you what I think I'm hearing, is one way to handle this kind of issue with making sure that they have like enough buffer or flexibility to handle all of this is, as opposed to extending repayment on this particular project, in the upcoming larger project, we could do terms that, we could impose terms that were added that flexibility at that point.
And the other thing is, all we heard is a big future project in a few years.
Yeah, that's where I'll at least, I kind of land on, if knowing that there's tools to deal with that in the future makes me lean towards preferring that. If I didn't know there were tools, then maybe I would think about that, but.
So Madam Chair, there's something else too. In the report, it indicates they're trying to get a WaterSmart grant.
Okay.
We don't know.
Yes. Okay.
So this is just authorization. So they're going to have to do a lot of legal work and all that and do committal of funds. We can't commit funds until they know about the WaterSmart grant, because that could change our cost share, because as you note in the cost share in the report, it doesn't include the WaterSmart grant. So by the time we come around to committal, if they did or did not receive the WaterSmart grant and how much it was, that can be adjusted at committal of funds. And if there's still a feeling at that point that they need longer terms, that could be adjusted at committal of funds.
Or we even have more details about what
We'll
this
have more details.
larger project is.
Yeah.
What? All right.
So those are kind of all the,
Yeah, go ahead, Blaine.
Madam Chair, I personally would feel better with leaving those until later, till we know. I mean, just a vague, in the future, we've got a big project, so we need more years. That's, to me, I would prefer leaving it at the 15 years.
Thank you. I'm seeing head nods and hearing agreement. Dana Van Horn, Randy Crozier, any questions or comments?
I'm fine.
Okay. I'm seeing agreement from both of you. All right.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, again, and this can be reiterated to them, this is only authorization.
Yes, okay.
So, if it takes them 6 months before they come back for committal of funds, then a lot could have happened. Maybe they will know when that future project is or isn't going to happen, as well as whether or not they're getting the WaterSmart grant and how much they're getting.
Great.
So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, so it'll be good to make that motion, Charles?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, okay, thank you. And I can't help myself because you started talking about pricing for alfalfa, and I was thinking about, like, there's got to be a futures market for that sort of thing, and there's got to be a way to address that. But I would like to put a plug in for the awesome ag economist at Utah State University. I'm certain that they would have some really helpful insight. I'm sure they're very, very busy, but I'm certain that they would have a bit of helpful insight as we're trying to transition our economic feasibility analysis and pricing for all these commodities. But again, could nerd out on this all day. All right. Yes, go ahead. Oh, no comment.
There's someone online.
Mic drop. Okay.
Madam Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Randy.
this is Randy.
Yes, please.
If you can determine the future price of hay or livestock. There ain't
Randy,
an
I've got my
economist out there that'll touch it.
I've got my crystal ball in my backpack. I'll when you come in, when we see each other next, I'll show it to you.
I'd appreciate it if you would, I don't want to buy it because it's probably worth just about as much as you paid for it. But,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just like the price of oil. I mean, it all goes up and down, and there's too many things that happen to come up with a firm price.
Absolutely.
I wish you could. Thank you.
Point well taken. Thank you. All right. It looks like we have someone online logged in as Winterton Suites.
That's Randy.
Oh, that was Randy. Oh, sorry, Randy. I'm sorry. All right. Well, thank you very much. All right. Well, let's go ahead and then move on to the next agenda item. So it looks like we've got committal of funds. Mike, this is in your area. Is Ethan?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Is coming up. Yeah. Yes. Go ahead.
Sorry about working with Zions. We've talked about having a meeting with Zions about these sorts of things, and I brought up, well, we kind of have an economist on our plate that
it'd be my pleasure just to hang out with financial
so
folks.
that's something that we can work out so that we can talk to them and see.
Yeah, that's great.
Did we try to get USU? No. Econ? Okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
There was a long process trying to replace Lyle Summers.
Yeah, I can imagine. Those are big shoes to fill. Thank you. Mike, would you like to share anything before Ethan gives his report? You're right. Sorry. Let's just get, because we'll forget about this.
Yes, I'm familiar with the Jones Reservoir Dam project. This was a dam that I actually worked on when I started working at the county 24 years ago. And it was soon after I started that we got the limited fill requirement. So it's been waiting a long time to get some work done on it. And I think they've been working to try and get funds to be able to work with this. So this is a timely thing. It's a good thing, and it's needed with the growth that we're seeing in our community. So I'll just let Ethan proceed.
Thank you.
Cool, that's cool to hear. Twin Creeks Special Service District for the upgrades to Jones Dam. This is located east of Heber City, about 9 miles east. And then it looks like Twin Creeks Special Service District has come before the board, but maybe not since the 90s when they did some culinary upgrades. But and they provide culinary and secondary water to kind of some of the areas east of Heber City. So the dam was constructed as it currently sits in 1956. It is 36 feet high, 450 feet long, and has a storage capacity of approximately 176 acre feet. It's been rated high hazard by the Division of Water Rights because of the potential for death and flood damage if it were to fail. And so the Dam Safety Office and Water Rights set this one forth as one that's been, as kind of the next one that's been waiting on funds. And so they're the next in line to get funds from the dam safety grants. And and I guess before I get too much farther, this has kind of been Tom's project, and so he's kind of been taking the lead on it. But long term, this will be my project. So just throwing that in there. But what else about the dam? Just a couple things that the Dam Safety Office noted are potential deficiencies: seepage, static and seismic stability, outlet conduit integrity, insufficient spillway capacity, and a lack of performance instrumentation. And so they're going to be upgrading all of that. There's a good long paragraph that kind of goes into more detail about exactly what they're going to be doing. as far as making some of those upgrades. And construction is anticipated to begin in June or July. And so the estimated cost is $2.3 million. The board share of using the dam safety grant would be $1.84 million. And the applicant would come up with $460,000. So the staff recommendation would be that the board commits 80% of the project cost up to $1.84 million as a dam safety grant. And yeah.
Great. Thank you, Ethan. Questions or comments from the board?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
just
please.
a question either for Mike or Ethan. Are they able to withstand the $460,000 of their cost share, or they need a loan, or how are they doing that way?
They haven't indicated to me exactly, but I believe that they can. Twin Creek Special Service District services the culinary needs of the whole east side of the Heber Valley, from the north to the south. So it's a large district. They do have a lot of customers, and they have a base. And so I haven't specifically spoke with them. I didn't know the project was even on until I received the information. We've been waiting a long time to get it done. So it's the reservoir's up there in the Timber Lakes area, if you know where that is. And it's been something that's, like I say, since I started with the county 25 years ago, it was an issue then. So it's just been waiting to get it done.
I believe Tom did check with them on if they could cover that, and it sounded like they were good. Okay. So I could go back and find that email.
Okay. Thank you. Do we anticipate that anyone from the project will be joining online, or I don't know, do they need to for committal of funds? I always forget. I don't think they need to, but.
Yeah, I do think their is it a chair or their president said he would join online. I believe that's the case.
Okay, that's great. All right, Mike, I assume you'll be okay making the motion on this one. It sounds like it's a long time coming, so we'll be with pleasure. Okay, so then we've got the 4 new applications to know RE 42, 43, 44, and 45. I assume we don't have to do anything else but note those, right? Okay. And then we'll hear the project update. Ethan, you're going to give a project update on the West Cache Irrigation Company. Probably just like save it, right? You don't want to like spoil that great presentation. So we'll look forward to that presentation. Thank you. And then Carly is going to give our Watershed Council's update. And then Candace will do her great director's report as always. So let's go ahead and move on to, seeing it, like no other questions on agenda. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to information to the board.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a number of items to discuss, but the first one is the status of fund. And I'm probably going to just keep Shalane up for the first 3 because I'll have her talk about each of them and I'll chime in as we go.
Yes, and I'm sitting because it could be here a little while. But yes, let's start with the status of funds. And as I said in the Water Development Coordinating Council earlier this week, I'm glad we're nearing the end of the fiscal year, because if you look at these pages, balances are looking pretty low. But at the beginning of every new fiscal year is when we take into account interest earned and repayments coming in for the next year, what we can expect. So these are reflective of what's been contracted, authorized, and committed, not necessarily what's been spent. But as you can see with the new King Irrigation project presented today, that's almost another $1 million from the revolving fund. So that takes the current available balance down to $3.3 million. The dam safety, we also have motion there today with the Jones Dam project for Twin Creek Special Service District. I did want to note, while we're considering dam safety and Mike mentioning that seeing it is the first he really realized. Just a reminder, these dam safety projects kind of get sprung on you because staff has been directed to contract for engineering in advance of bringing it to you. I'll just mention we had a couple dam safety projects early on in the upgrade process that kept coming back and kept coming back for additional funds, because a lot of times you don't really know what's needed for a complete dam safety upgrade until you start getting in there. And as a reminder on dam safety projects, water rights can't require anyone to upgrade their dam until there are state funds available. You don't really have the option of funding or not if they're on the priority list and you have funds available. Then the law says you will provide a grant of at least 80%. The board has directed staff in the past that for municipalities and water districts, it should be an 80% grant. For irrigation companies, it should be 90%. So that's what staff will always bring to you, is if you realize that the percentages are not the same across the board, the 80% is for municipalities and water districts. The 90% is for nonprofit irrigation companies. That's what we'll bring. Anyway, just a quick update on. Yes, exactly.
Since you opened it up, I wanted to note for my mom who's in the back that when we're talking about dam safety and dam projects, we are talking about DAMN. I know you were getting confused or concerned and confused, but.
Not DAMN, come on. Yes, so the upgrade standards, the minimum standards are set by the Dam Safety Office and the Division of Water Rights. They determine what high hazard dams meet those requirements and what don't. They set the priority list. You have the funding mechanism, so we work very closely with them. But so as you can see with that grant of 1.84 that we're requesting be committed today, that leaves our balance of just over 17 million. And trust me, Tom does have that already pretty much planned out, who's coming up, working with the Office of Dam Safety. Our city's water loan fund, the two authorized projects haven't moved forward with committal. So the actual balance is still 17.8, but if we look at the authorized projects, we're showing a balance of only 3.5 million available right now. And C&D, where so much of the action is, we're still having lots of regular projects. I mean, I'm sure you noticed with those 4 new applications, I believe several of them were from the C&D fund. But the balance there, if we were to actually contract everything that is authorized and committed currently, our balance in the C&D fund would be $2 million, which is very unusual for me. It makes me a little nervous. But knowing that there's a lot of that that's authorized and may not necessarily be going anywhere, I'm okay. I'm still okay. Yes, Brian.
Can I ask a question? Are there statutory requirements for carryover? Is there that requirement, 1? 2, and I'm not in this field, so I don't know, is there best practices kind of, is there like, in generally, if we're operating a nonprofit or a for-profit or something, is there a best practice guide that we could go with in terms of how much we should have for carryover?
And I don't know if statutorily there's anything, since these are revolving funds. We are getting repayments throughout the year. While I paint this on a fiscal year basis, it's really, I mean, we get repayments in December, we get some in March, we get, I mean, you just saw Wellsville-Mendon makes their payments January 1st. Interest is accruing throughout the year. So our funds do always carry over in these basic revolving funds. Now, we do have the one we've spoken about before, the small system secondary grants, that's different, which is, we have to be careful of. I've never looked into necessarily a best practices. That's something I'd be willing to look into and see if there's a way of handling things. I think knowing that even with what's committed, if you look at what's contracted, we still have 59 million in the account. Committed, there's another 15. So even if those all contracted before the end of the fiscal year, we'd still have 44. But, so while we look at authorized projects as having this money kind of tied up, we'll have further discussion after status of funds about the board's guidelines.
Sure.
And part of that in there is about, one of Kyle's comments was about the duration of authorization, how long it's valid for. So we'll go into that a little bit further as
I'm
well.
not trying to be that guy. Let me
No.
be clear. This came up in a separate conversation on a completely separate project on what like best practices were for carryover.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious if we're having those discussions at a state level as well.
You piqued my interest, and it's not specific to this necessarily, but just generally. We might want to compare notes with Dave Damshin's, the former state treasurer who's at Utah Housing Corporation. It's not really apples to apples, but it might be worth just asking. And I don't know if there's a comparison or not, but
Okay.
if I see him, I'll ask.
Okay.
It might just be interesting to know. I do know that we've chuckled about these stories many a time, but way back in the day when I was a governor's analyst and we were looking for money in the Great Recession, we found a whole bunch of money sitting in
Yes,
these
you
funds.
did.
And
Yes,
I
you
remember staffing a
did.
call with, I think, Governor Huntsman and I think Todd Adams, and explaining that those are contracted funds and are
Yes,
going
and
to
that's
work. So
the contracted
Yeah.
ones, that's really the ones, those are tied up. The others, we say, hey, they're committed, but that's one reason we don't like a lot sitting out there is we like to be able to tell the legislature, keep your hands off our money.
Just kind of the nature of a lot of this, the authorized can sit there a long time just because the nature of these projects and the nature of our commitment to serve these communities and so forth.
Right.
That is kind of how that works.
Yep.
And these aren't types of projects like a housing project where there'll be land or a committal of land or a committal of certain types of projects, and we know what those are costing and there's a schedule. That doesn't happen
Right.
with most
And
of these types of projects. And so we are a little bit different animal in that respect. And looking at it, it doesn't particularly bother me too much to
Right.
see, well, okay, if everybody does everything, we've only got $2 million.
Right.
But we'll have more funds coming in.
Yep.
Through the revolving fund. If the legislature commits more funds to this, there are all kinds, and we're not going in the hole.
Right.
That's
No,
where, that's
absolutely.
where it gets touchy with me, is are we going in the hole?
Exactly.
And I think the very nature of what we're doing right now and realizing, hey, we're getting close to the bottom. We're not at the bottom, but we're getting close, just so everybody knows. And then we know when projects are theorized or people look into projects, you say, well, we may not have that ability to fund your $50 million project
Right.
at this time. And I do agree that at some point we've got to go back to some of these authorized and say, and I've been getting lots of emails lately about some of these and say, are you really going to do this? And so I can see that's maybe where we ought to look more at where best practices or a good policy ought to be is how long do we really want to let these go on?
Right.
And then we'll open the door up for other communities.
Exactly.
But it doesn't concern me too much personally.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
And you have that kind of good experience of seeing how this works. It is not. Thank you for adding the dates, and I know that I can't remember. We saw some on here that were very, very old,
Yes.
and so we've moved those to that page. So, but
Madam
again,
Chairman?
there's continuing like improvement in how we're thinking about these things. I appreciate. I think
Yes.
Randy, do you have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I had a comment. Just to give you an example, I was with Dry Gulch Irrigation Company years ago and started working on rebuilding Fox and Crescent reservoirs that were back in the wilderness area. And it actually took me 13 years to get authorization to actually build those projects. And so I mean, it's not uncommon for these projects to take a long time. And so I think we need to be fully aware, and I think we can defend these projects because they do take such a long time. You know, even after you've got your funding and all secured, it still is a long road. So we want to be careful as to how we don't want to create something that doesn't allow us to carry money over, because and as I've seen, as we've progressed over the years, this fund gets tighter and tighter every year. Is that a fair statement, Shalene?
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair statement. We will have, because of some of the larger projects that the board has funded recently, that will increase the amount of repayments that are also coming back. So, I mean, because your repayment periods are not super long most of the time, the repayments are slightly increasing every year. So, yeah, I think they're looking tighter than I've seen since I've been in this position and keeping track of the status of funds. But I do know there have been times when it's really been a game of timing because of the limited funds available. And we really, while on paper it looks limited, it's not as limited really as it is, simply because there are these authorized projects out there that haven't moved forward. And some of that is tied to getting federal funding or other permits that might be required. You know, as you mentioned the dates, yeah, there's a couple of dam safety projects on there that were dated, committal was 2017, which is 7 years ago. A little ridiculous, but they are still on the list, do still need to get things done, but I do believe they are actually receiving NRCS funding for part of the dam, is why the board's share was so small. And the NRCS just has not pursued that yet, is my understanding. So I will note that when there is a project, and as I said, we'll have more discussion about the board guidelines, when there is a project that has a lengthy date from when it's been authorized to now, we are staying in contact with them to see if they're really going to pursue it. If they are still planning on the project, that's when we won't remove it. We would make them be reauthorized before we asked you to commit funds. We would make them come back for reauthorization if it's been more than 2 years, because that's how long your authorization, our guidelines say that's how long your authorization is good for. So anything beyond that, if it's still on the list, we know that they still want to pursue their project. And we're just leaving it there as kind of a placeholder and not removing it to free up those funds. But we would make them come back for reauthorization, submit updated plans and specs, all of that before we asked you to consider actually committing those funds. So.
No, I appreciate that. You know, when projects are, let's face it, they're getting more and more expensive because there's so many other complications into them. So I think we've got to do everything we can to defend our funds, and I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Randy.
Madam Chair, if I might, just a couple of things, and Shalane did a great job of talking about kind of the dam safety and the funding kind of process. I'm curious, and what we have an item to give you guys an update on Panguitch Dam, but I'm curious if the board would be interested in having the Division of Water Rights' Dam Safety Office come and kind of present, how does our prioritization work? What does it look like? What are the minimum dam safety standards? I know we do have some veteran board members and then some newer board members. So just if that's of interest, we'd be happy to get Everett Taylor to come in and chat, the manager of the dam safety section.
That'd be very helpful. Yeah, very
Okay,
helpful.
great. And then just one other thing, since Shalane brought it up, just wanted to kind of bring awareness to the board on one of the funds that you guys oversee in the small system secondary meter grant funds. So this is a $2 million appropriation. So that's on page 6. That comes to the board to distribute. One of the interesting things about it is that money lapses every year. So one of my concerns has been is if the board chooses to provide this grant fund out, there is a 50% cost share out to a system, and they are slow, and it takes them, let's say, 2 irrigation seasons, or maybe the meters were not available. That then it becomes, we lapse that money, and then how do we address that, right? So one of the things I've been talking a little bit to Shalane and about is there is a potential that at some point we may want to consider having an application period for that, distributing it, contracting it, and then they have a year to complete it. So the board's doesn't have the funds that they should have to cover it. That's one of the things that we've been discussing, but wanted to get kind of your general sense on that. We feel comfortable with Lehigh City. Lehigh City's moving super quickly and doing a lot. So we feel like they're not gonna sit on this. They're gonna help us expend these funds. But that is just a concern I have.
Yeah, and to add to that, you may recall we did have a bit of a conversation about this in March when we asked you to commit those grant funds to Lehigh because they are a large city, but they still qualify as a small system. And that's where we discussed, yes, we're overcommitted, but we won't ever overspend. We won't ever overspend a fund. But we are overcommitted because it's a $2 million appropriation every year. And yet we have been, so far, we've been given authority to carry over $2 million. $2 million. So if the balance is more than that, then we lose it. So last year we did lose, I'm going to say about $900,000. And we're able to carry over 2 million. Now we're getting another 2 million. So that's why we have asked you to overcommit that pot, because it is unique from your other funds that you have available. And that is definitely one where we're at the mercy of the applicants because it's not committed. It's not even contracted. It's what's actually spent. If it's not spent in the fiscal year, we could lose it.
I mean, you kind of answered my question because you said that there is some authority around carrying forward 2 million. So that makes me think that it was thoughtful to make it so, because sometimes things are lapsing because they just didn't get non-lapsing authority. So
Right.
Do you all have insight into the policy making around making it?
No,
And pairing that with that has to be tied to an expenditure. You could, I'm just wondering if there's maybe something we're missing in terms of the policy
I'm not
thought
certain.
or okay.
No, I'm not certain. I know this is just one, we work very closely with our financial manager because he's the one tracking all of these things, and this appropriation comes differently than some of the others. And so the actual $2 million carryover is only because we asked.
Yeah.
It wasn't appropriated allowing that. We asked, can we please carry over 2 million of this?
Okay.
And that's what they gave us authority for. Okay. So yes, considering an application period and a specific time to use it is might be worthwhile just to guarantee doing what we can every year. But so far, I mean, like I said, last year, ARPA had consumed and we'd let some of this not be the highest priority, and so we lost some. We are doing everything we can to not let that happen this June 30th. And I think we'll be okay. We are expecting Lehigh and Pleasant Grove, who's not on this list because they were contracted before this current fiscal year, will also spend enough to get us below that $2 million carryover. So we should be good there.
Madam Chair, just like to make a comment. I think staff has been proactive in taking a look at current projects and reaching out to them and saying, we have some additional funds available in this particular pot. That's how Hates Creek Irrigation Company is coming to us, because they were proactive and reached out to them and said, hey, would you be interested or willing to consider an application in this area?
Yes.
And so I compliment the staff for being, forward thinking in that regard.
Thank you, Kyle. So to continue on with the status of funds, the rest is pretty much the ARPA funding, which has been completely authorized and committed. You'll recall last meeting, you set a deadline of May 17th, which is next week. So Marisa will be covering that here in just a little bit about what the current status of all of that is. If we've received acceptance, rejection, or requests to convert. She'll cover that here in just a little bit. But so the remaining funds have been committed, much of it contracted, but not all yet. So is there any more question on the status of funds? Nope.
Okay, great. Thanks, Shalane. So the next item we wanted to chat about with the board from our last board meeting is we had talked about revisiting the board rules and looking at kind of how can we enhance water conservation requirements as part of the funding that the board offers. So Shalane did some work since the last board meeting, and I'll let her kind of articulate some of that.
Thank you. And there was even a broader discussion. There was focused discussion about water conservation, and then broader discussion. I gave you all a Word doc of the current board guidelines and asked if there were any suggestions. There were a couple comments and questions, so we'll go into all of that. So as I looked into the current board guidelines, when it comes to water conservation, it's really vague, and I think that's on purpose. And the board guidelines versus the actual direction to staff, a water conservation plan is simply listed as one of the requirements that the board will require between authorization and committal of funds. When staff actually sends a letter saying, okay, your project has been authorized, now these are the requirements you must meet before we'll commit funds or provide any funding, it's not just prepare a water conservation plan, it's prepare and have it approved by division staff. And our water conservation section has grown significantly in the last few years, which is great. And they have a few different lists of requirements, including actual law called the Water Conservation Plan Act, that they have to follow. They've set up different things that they recommend for some who aren't required, but the Water Conservation Plan Act actually requires a plan by a water provider who is defined as a retail water supplier or a water conservancy district. So those two types of entities are required to submit a water conservation plan, and it has to meet certain requirements in the law. And those requirements include meeting the regional water conservation goals or exceeding them or giving a really good reason why they can't. And so those are requirements that have to be met before division staff will approve a water conservation plan. And if our division staff doesn't approve that plan, we're not going to recommend that you commit funds for a project. So when it comes to the water conservation, I don't feel like it's really necessary to change your guidelines. What I've realized as I've gone through this and seen a couple of other things, especially the dam safety stuff we've already talked about, some other things, I'm like, some of this is just stuff that staff knows they're supposed to do, and we probably received a memo from directors or supervisors at some point, but I don't know that it's actually written in any one place for staff to follow. So the board's guidelines are actually an administrative rule online, found in the Utah Administrative Code. But as we've discussed several times, the very last item in the rule says these are meant to be guidelines and the board has discretion, basically. But then there have been some clear direction from the board to staff about what to do regarding certain things. So my suggestion, before I do that, I did want to mention what Kyle's comments, Dana also had submitted. She found a typo, and Dana, I'm happy to report that that's not actually a typo in the rules. That was simply caused by my error when I converted the PDF rule to a Word doc and then edited it. I missed that typo. So it's not actually in the rules, it's not actually in the guidelines, so it's nothing that needs to be corrected. But Kyle had submitted a couple of comments. One of them I alluded to before was the 2-year authorization. And, sorry, I had it. Here it is. The board's authorization is valid for 2 years, and you can clearly see in the status of funds there are authorized projects that have been sitting out there much longer than 2 years. And as I stated, as we stay in contact with them, if it's still a project they want to pursue, we will leave that there and just require a reauthorization in the future. When it's clear to staff that they don't have real plans, they don't have ideas, it's not a valid project, we will tell them, we're going to withdraw you from consideration, and when you decide what you want to do, you'll need to submit a new application. But when staff's been in contact and they've indicated, yes, we're trying, we're working on this, or we're working on that, we do leave them on there beyond the 2 years. We just require reauthorization before we'll move it forward. Another question was actually in the guidelines referring to the secondary water meter loans that you offer. It states that the board will allocate up to $10 million annually for secondary meter loans. Well, clearly you've done a whole lot more than $10 million a year. And this is one of those items that I had brought to you a few years ago and said, it says up to 10 million. Are you okay if we go over 10 million? And even before we received ARPA funds, the board said yes. If there are secondary meter projects willing to borrow to install those projects, let's pay for them. If we have the funding available, let's fund those. So as these are guidelines, I don't know that that's necessarily a change that needs to be made either. Especially, I don't know, once 2030 hits, maybe you won't need much at all. Who knows? But whoever's on the board at that time can make that decision, because, so my recommendation at this point is not necessarily to change any of the guidelines or the rules that are currently in place unless the board feels very strongly about something. Those were the only comments, concerns I had received. Knowing that the water conservation section is reviewing every plan, and even those that aren't required by the Plan Act still have requirements they have to meet. So even irrigation companies are required to submit a plan when they're going to receive funding. There are different criteria that have to be met because they're not retail water suppliers. It's ag water. They're still looking at optimization and conservation. But I think because the conservation section has clearly defined what it is they're looking for in a plan, it's not just funding section staff looking at those plans going, okay, you made one. That's good enough for us. We've got the conservation section involved, and I think requiring their approval is appropriate. So my intent is to actually create a document for staff defining the clear direction that the board has given on multiple things that aren't laid out in the rules, the guidelines elsewhere. So are there any other comments, questions? I know Candace is on the edge of her seat.
I love water conservation. I think there, and I totally agree with Shalane that, you know, our conservation staff does a great job of looking at the water conservation plans. I think there are some probably things that we could, the board could require if it was interest. One of the things, for example, with our landscaping incentive program, for a resident to be eligible for that, their municipality has to adopt water efficiency standards for new construction. And while obviously that's not going to apply to an irrigation company, but if there was, you know, a city coming to us and they haven't adopted the standards, that could be something the board could choose. And once again, it's just kind of changing how we grow and, you know, growing water-wise, and using that as a leverage point. If you want these funds, then you need to do these things, is a potential the board could consider. Another comment that I've heard is that, yes, we have the Water Conservation Plan Act that sets the goal of meeting the regional water conservation goals. One of the things that has been questioned is if there was an area that had more aggressive goals than that, for regional reasons, could we require them to meet those kind of more aggressive regional goals above the regional water conservation goals, right? So that's something else that's been suggested, and I would just put that out as options that the board could consider.
I do think meeting local requirements would be very helpful and appropriate, because otherwise I think that we kind of get in the way of kind of the core function of regional planning, and I think that would be helpful. The second, I mean, I live and breathe in this world of conservation just based on my other assignments, and I mean, one of the things that I think I find interesting about some of the projects we're approving, it is conservation, but it may actually increase depletion. And that's something from a water standpoint, I think that we have to be aware of. And so maybe it might be helpful to be able to have more depth of briefing when we were briefed on these projects about what that looks like, just so that everything's on the record and we're aware. And I'm not trying to create additional work. I absolutely not. I understand that. I just am trying to figure out how we get the best information available, and try to figure out how, in a changing world, which we are living in, how we have the best and most defensible positions.
I think I on this, I mean, particularly the second example that you gave, Candace, like, for me, I think I've just assumed that it's been kind of implied that the conservation goal would be the local or regional, just, as we're thinking about like what the goals of all this is. So I've been thinking, well, that's just, again, kind of implied. And so I think just looking for your guidance on whether or not, my assumption of that, or our assumption of that is enough, or if it really does have to be explicitly stated somewhere, whether it be in administrative rule, even though administrative rule we say is guideline, but like in administrative rule or in this kind of policy guidance document that you're looking to. But I guess I don't know. I know this is where maybe some of the challenge lies, but being more explicit, or at least having the briefing so it goes on the record and our comments are captured is helpful. Not on the specific issue, but just because I've seen this with some of the other organizations I'm working with. I'm so glad that it sounds like Shalene's going to do some documentation. I would just ask that if you do that, maybe, once every year or a couple of years, you share that with the board. I know that
Yes.
it's like you're capturing the board's wishes, but I've been running into things where there's a certain process or policy that's, being executed upon because like a board from 15 years ago
Exactly.
directed staff to do that, and then, and you just don't even know about it until you see it. And so
No,
I think
and
the
that-
transparency is really helpful.
Thank you, Juliette. That is actually my intention, is to create this document and share it with the board so that if you can see these directions that the board has given in the past and you have a problem as the current board, that's your prerogative to change. So that is my intention.
So, Madam Chair, can I ask a question? Is there an action item needed here, or is there something that we can contemplate and then maybe review for our next board meeting?
I would just ask, I guess to that point, if the board, if any of those items you would like to see drafted into a proposed rule, we could do that. I think we need more direction from the board on how to go forward.
Can I maybe put it as an action item on our next committee meeting and then give us time to contemplate about what it is we want to do?
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And then, again, like what I'm looking for too is some advice on, so I think we can kind of think about like what are, some of the policy assumptions or preferences, but then it's, again, like, well, where does that belong? And maybe that's like maybe for Marty Bushman to weigh in on, or, does it need to be explicitly an administrative rule because there's that process for that, or does it need to be somewhere else? And I know, Shalene, you've kind of taken a look at it, and it sounds like kind of your recommendation is, I think we're okay, and it feels like we are, but then, sometimes then some of the items that Candace brought up, do we have enough cover with, so just getting your kind of feedback on what.
I think what I'd like to do is meet with Candace and possibly Shelby, our conservation coordinator, put a few things together, send that out to all of you within the next month, and see what direction you would like to take for the June meeting. That's what I'm getting a sense of, is so that in order to take some action at the June meeting, prepare something within the next 2 to 3 weeks, get that out to all of you and see what action you would like to take.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Randy Crozier,
Madam Chairman.
yes, okay, good. It's working. When you would like to speak, you're showing up on the screen, so go ahead.
Excuse me, just to comment on the ag side, Brian, and I understand where you're coming from, but, you're asked to conserve and asked to make your water go farther, and then in some instances, they want to, and I think probably a couple of projects today were an example where it shows that those are going to be more profitable, and because they're going to be more profitable is because they can grow more crops with their water because they're getting it to their own personal property, which is what the water right has been based on. And yet there's others that would like to see that water just go to the stream. And so, I mean, it's a tough situation, and and I'm going to stand on the farmer's side today, I guess, because I'm still one of the few that's still left in base agriculture, and I don't want to see us mandating that if someone conserves some water, it has to go back to the stream, or we will no longer see any water conservation or any better quality of management of the water as far as beneficial use. So I don't know if that's where your thoughts are headed. I'm just a little concerned, Brian.
Point well made, and I'm not trying to pick a fight with anybody or any industry. I just think that we're being asked the question frequently on what depletion is. We're being asked the question if we are going to invest as a state in $270 million in agricultural optimization, what the obligation is for that individual, and we're just trying to figure that out. And so this is maybe more of a macro question than it is even trying to set board policy. I just am curious on the information we're getting.
Oh, and I understand that. And I mean, this has been a touchy subject for a lot of years, which most of us, it's accumulated gray hair. We've been in this discussion for a long time. And I just think we have to be careful about how we approach it. So, and I think water rights is where the depletion question needs to stay personally.
Totally.
Anyway, that's
totally agree.
That's my comments.
Got it.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
All right, thanks, gentlemen. So we'll look for Shalane on top of everything else she's working on, but we appreciate you helping us out, and then we'll take as an action item to review, and sounds like hopefully be ready to actually do something in June.
Yes.
Which will come up so quickly. Well,
Right.
Goodness. When you said June, I thought, I thought it was already June.
June
so.
20th, so
Okay,
yeah,
a little
there's
ways.
a little bit of time.
We just have I know we're at 11:30, so we'll hopefully move just a little bit quicker. We have a few other items. Wanted to quickly have Shalane give you an update on Panguitch Dam and kind of where that's at.
Yes. So I'm sure you've all seen the news and what happened. And I'll start off by saying Panguitch Dam's issues were not a minimum standards issue, even though Panguitch Lake Dam is a high hazard dam. The issues at Panguitch Lake were, at least dam safety has decided, were primarily caused by the ice on the reservoir. I will say the dam is kind of a hodgepodge. It's very, very old, and then has been shored up, and the size increased multiple times over the years. So what happened is, well, the core of the dam may be like this. There's a little bit at the top, maybe 2 to 5 feet of concrete that's just straight across the top, with the reservoir full and ice on it, and then the wind occurred, it pushed that top and made it tilt, which caused a crack across the top of the dam. The entire dam was designed to be the spillway. So it was made to overtop, but that top concrete piece was added, what did we say, in the 40s or 50s, and wasn't actually approved by the state engineer's office. So we don't really know how it was constructed, if it was actually rebarred into the rest of the dam or if it was just poured over the top. So that's what was pushed by the ice, and the water flowed through. But they were able, the outlet worked, they were able to open that up and let water out. They've reduced, they were able to break the ice around the dam to get that to stop pushing against the dam. So at this point, there's not water flowing through. They've lowered the level of the reservoir so that it's not pushing against that compromised portion at the top of the dam. And they have an engineer who's now working with them, making recommendations. They were talking about possibly just replacing that top piece of concrete again. That is not their engineer's recommendation. I sat in on a company board meeting this week. They're recommending either a concrete overlay for the upstream face to strengthen the dam or a complete rehabilitation. So of course the company is looking for funding. The dam is owned by West Panguitch Irrigation and Reservoir Company, who has come to the board several times in the past for various projects, and including that outlet that worked to let the water out. So it's on them at this point to decide just how big of a fix they want. It sounds like a concrete overlay could be in the range of $2 to $5 million. A complete rehabilitation could be in the $5 to $8 million range. Because it's not a minimum standards issue, they do not qualify for dam safety upgrade grant. So it would be project funding, regular board funding from the C&D fund. They are looking for funds elsewhere, but we have instructed them, go ahead and get your application and get it in, so that we can at least start our investigation process if you think you'll pursue. But without plans and specs and a clearly defined project to move forward with, I don't expect we'll see anything for at least a couple of weeks till they've had a chance to meet more in depth with their engineer. So just to let you know, it's no longer in danger. The actual dam is holding just fine. And in fact, Everett Taylor with Water Rights showed us a picture earlier this week. They have cut a notch to allow some water through if it reaches a certain level to not further stress the very top of the dam.
I would just note one other item on Panguitch Lake is the board did provide dam safety funding in 2011, so there was a minimum dam safety project that was done on the lake several years ago. So this dam wasn't even on the list for not meeting minimum dam safety standards. So this was not a minimum dam safety issue.
Yep. For questions, I just want to say thank you to your team and for just giving us communications around that. It was really helpful for Michael to be following up. I know, because sometimes you get questions and you're sometimes I find out in other places, and it was great to have that amazing proactive communication for us as the board, so thank you. Kyle, yeah?
Just a question relative to the funding request that may come forward. Shalane, where you indicated that the engineer has looked at different options, and the concrete overlay is not his recommendation, but would that be considered a feasible fix?
Yes.
You know, at $2 million as opposed to the engineer's recommendation of and so which is the board obligated to go with the engineer's recommended fix, or if the other one is a acceptable?
Yeah, the board isn't obligated to the company's engineer's recommendation. Okay. And that's part of what the application that comes to you is the company deciding what they can really afford, what makes the most sense for them. But then our staff does do their full investigation to decide, is this what that's being proposed? Does it make it worthwhile for the board to pursue? So.
And I would add, Kyle, I would add that the Division of Water Rights through their dam safety program does regulate dams. And so they will have to meet whatever requirements dam safety would. So it's not necessarily just I'm not saying this is what the engineer is doing, just to clarify, but not just an engineer upselling, a company. There are requirements that they have to meet, and the dam safety office at Water Rights would have to approve them.
Absolutely. Anytime there's a new dam or upgrades, repair, maintenance to an old dam, dam safety has to approve that work. Okay, I think that's it for me.
Okay, I have two quick more items. Marisa, do you want to give an update on the ARPA funding? and all of your awesome staff's efforts to try to get some clarity around exemptions and quick mean.
You stand between us and lunch. Which I'm not
3
sure what
minutes
that
sounds
means.
great.
I like it. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure what that means.
I would like to say that it is not to actual size necessarily, the scale. All the numbers aren't perfect at this point. I am cleaning those up though, and I'm just going to see if I can really quickly show off something. This is going to be part of my 3 minutes. Oh, I need one too, if I could.
And Shalane and Marisa, maybe at the break, could one of you make sure that Dana and Randy have these documents available?
Oh, I'm sorry, I could email them. Shoot, do you want me to email them really quick?
No, we can during the break.
Oh, okay. Sorry, okay. I'm gonna see if I can quickly, I don't know how quickly. Okay. This is for fun. 100 and something applications, 116, 5 of which decided early on they didn't want to use our funds after all. And we've got things listed. These are the ones that we feel are active, and you can see there's a lot of work. Plans, specs, do they have a UEI, unique entity identification number, which is new to us. And all these in the contracts, and Juliette's aware of all these contracts, and
I've been seeing a lot. They just hit my inbox.
and
then
as you
at
see here, these
11
are the,
o'clock, I signed them.
yeah, these are the ones that we think are gonna, we're positive they're gonna do something, but they still haven't spent a dime. And so we are reaching out to them a lot and saying, why aren't you spending the money? So we're getting that word out. These are the ones that we are understanding want to go exempt, whether that be a formal exemption or just they're not going to use our funds. And so all the stuff we've been trying to reach out. We have sent out forms, as a few of you are highly aware of the forms, and Brian felt left out, so I've got about 35 emails I could forward to him if he would like that fall in the Great Salt Lake Basin area. This is what we're looking at right now. We have gotten a lot of forms signed saying they are not going to use the funds. Either they're exempt or they're just changing their mind. So $10 million is about what we know that we're getting back. There is $14 million still up in the air. These numbers that I'm showing you may not match exactly what's on this piece of paper. There are 4 in particular that are talking about that are worth almost $10 million. They're talking about wanting to convert. There's an option in the funds that if they are exempt, they can convert the funds for an alternate water project, but they have to show to the satisfaction of the board that it will conserve more water than metering. And so we are using your May 17th deadline, and I so appreciate that because they are hearing that May 17th deadline. And then Candace backed up even more and said, who do we need to talk to more? So a letter went out in the snail mail, and Brad and Ethan were fantastic in getting this all together. We had to teach Brad what a stamp was, but other than that, I'm just kidding. And also sent out emails, but these are all, we're asking, if you're gonna use the funds, tell us you're gonna use the funds, and by when are you gonna start using the funds? And then we've asked for those, if you're not gonna use the funds, please release them. So we're asking them ahead of time, but come May 17th, if they have not responded to our emails, to Candace's letter to them, we have made it very clear that those funds are subject to forfeiture back to the board. Brad is sending a lot of these emails, most of these emails out, and he's receiving the reply to all to a lot of these emails. So his email box is pretty full, and he's been working hard to update all of this. Just see on here just really quickly, if I need to, so, well, I said 5 won't be using, okay. Yeah, there's 5 that we're pretty sure won't be using funds, but they still have not responded to us. That's on the first page, 2.4 million. Many of them have their reasons they haven't started. A lot of the problem is backup of meters and backup of parts. And then there's some that we found out have their meters and parts, but haven't sent us a reimbursement request. And we're like, can we please show you the money? We would like to get this money going, even though they're not under construction. So on the backside of this, 13 projects have released funds. Those are going to have to go through withdrawal reports to the board. So we're figuring that out, and we need to be able to do that before we then reallocate those funds. 6 projects said they'll release. It's just under 5 million, but we haven't gotten, we've talked to them. They said, yeah, send us a form. We haven't heard back from them. And then there's the 4 projects that will possibly convert the funds for an alternate water project. They have to respond by May 17th. And they've called and asked a couple of them what level on the plans. And I said enough to get a good cost estimate. And they said 30% plans, design plans, and that is typical of when they submit an application. And I said that will be enough. But they have to have been approved by then by water rights, which has been another fun thing for us, as water rights thought they didn't have to worry about this requirement until 2030. And we let them know we've got dozens of projects that we need to know now. And so we've been on the phone a lot. Heidi King, Mariah Kahn, Jack Heinzman, Brad, part of the team, Randy Staker, furiously getting money out the door. There's been a lot going on, so.
Thanks, Marisa.
I don't know if there's questions.
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah.
Question, this just covers the grant portion?
ARPA, And we've had to clarify that a little to people too. Because we've had attorneys calling saying, what do we need to do? And we're like, no, that's the loan. So we've made some clarifying and saying, no, we're just focused on the grant right now. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Marisa. That was awesome. And lastly, I just wanted, and I appreciate Marty being so patient, have Marty Bushman from the AG's office give you a quick update on the litigation, the GSL litigation, and kind of where that's at.
There we go. Marty Bushman with the Utah Attorney General's office. Candace asked if I would just give you kind of an update what's happening with this Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment lawsuit. As the board may recall in previous briefings, this is a lawsuit that was filed against the Department of Natural Resources, the Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands, and the State Engineer, the Division of Water Rights back in September. And it claims that the 3 defendants have violated the public trust doctrine, which is a doctrine applies to navigable bodies of water, and the bed of those bodies governs the disposition of the bed and banks. And they alleged by failing to maintain a certain minimum elevation in the lake that we have violated that public trust responsibility. And they're asking the court to enter an order that would more or less compel the state to enjoin or curtail upstream water diversions. In their mind, that is the principal cause of the elevation declines. I would disagree with that. Drought is the major cause because in 1985 there were no, shortages of water in the lake, despite we still had a lot of diversions then. But anyway, this is a case we've taken very seriously. Among the 3 defendants, we've got 9 assistant attorney generals assigned representing them in my division, 2 law clerks. We also have 3 other divisions within the Department of Natural Resources that have intervened in this lawsuit: Division of Wildlife, Division of Parks, and Division of Water Resources. And among those, we have 5 more assistant attorney generals assigned. So In total, I've got probably more than half of my office working on this case of my division of attorneys, we have some very competent attorneys, and we take this very seriously because you understand what happened if we have to start taking people's water from them involuntarily, and doing it by priority probably won't work, since agriculture rights are generally the most senior, and municipal industrial, where you'd have the least amount of flexibility in taking water, are generally more junior. So also in this case, we've had, and I got to get the exact number, but it's well over a dozen other water conservation districts and water distribution entities in the state of Utah have intervened as defendants in this case, worried about the very same things that Water Resources is. If we got to start curtailing water rights, if this case results in that, we want to be part of this to make sure it doesn't, because I think everybody understands how complicated it could get. And then you even more complicated is you look at our state constitution confirmed everybody's water rights in 1896, which probably represents the vast majority of the current water rights, causing depletions in the Great Salt Lake Basin. And that's another group of rights we're not sure it could ever touch, even the public trust doctrine. Now, we're arguing that doctrine does not apply to water, applies to the bed, not to water, which a few other states have held. And we have a number of other defenses that we think will work on this. It's just to get back to I want to add one other thing. With the well over the dozen water conservancy districts and water distributors up and down the Wasatch Front and the Salt Lake Basin, we've got over 20 private attorneys. And these are the Steve Clydes, the John Mabeys, the Scott Martins, Mark Stratfords, the top lawyers across the state in water law. And we meet weekly to discuss and coordinate everything we do so that their arguments are consistent with ours with theirs. We're all reviewing everybody's materials. And so I just want to say, you've got the best legal minds in the state of Utah working on this issue. The complaint was filed, the state and the state first filed its motion to dismiss in December, mid-December. And then it was followed a month or two later by all of the other intervening parties. A couple of weeks ago, the plaintiffs in the case filed their opposition, 135 pages of opposition, and then a couple hundred pages of attachments. They filed to that, and we're now working on a reply memo, which we have till the 31st to put together. So that's kind of where we are. If the motions to dismiss are successful, I feel confident we've got some good arguments, strong arguments. The case will be dismissed. It will undoubtedly be appealed to the Utah Supreme Court. If we were to not prevail on a motion to dismiss, the case will proceed to discovery, and then there'll probably be another phase of what's called motions for summary judgment. Similar types of legal arguments, just we got a broader array of facts we can consider, whereas usually on motions to dismiss, you can only consider the facts that are actually in the pleadings or in the complaint, limited to that. So that is my progress report. Is there any questions?
Any questions? I was just say maybe Marty, you can let us know if any questions are better held in in attorney-client conversation land or whatever it's called. It sounds like we don't have any questions.
I'm on the internet today, so
yeah, exactly.
I'm not revealing anything
That's
that would
great.
be
Yeah.
privileged.
Thank you.
Say if you guys wanted more details about arguments or positions or things like that, I'd be happy to talk to you individually, but not in a public meeting.
Great.
I have a question, and
Yeah.
you may not be able to answer it, but the interests involved, I know his name's on it. These outside interests from the state.
Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment, I believe, are largely Utah-based. The Center for Biological Diversity, no. It's an environmental organization that's very active litigating environmental issues, Endangered Species Act, water issues across the nation. There is also Earth Justice, that some of their lawyers involved. It's another environmental organization not based out of Utah. You got the Utah Rivers Council, which is, as far as I know, predominantly based out of Utah. And I think, did I miss someone? Those are the main ones. All of the attorneys, almost entirely, are Center for Biological Diversity and Earth Justice.
And I would just add to Marty's report, Liz Harris, who has been the AG working on this for the Division of Water Resources and the board, unfortunately left the Natural Resources
Yeah, she jumped
section.
divisions on us. And
Yeah,
went over to
division.
environmental.
So now, until we hire a new AG, Wendy Crother will be representing the division and the board.
Yeah, I think yesterday she filed a notice of substitution of counsel, so she'll be the official attorney of record. And I mean, we've got a lot of attorneys, and we've signed individual attorneys to each party just in case there ever is a conflict. I don't anticipate there will be. It's our goal to make sure that whatever we do is unified. It'd not be a very good defense to come in and split and have our arguments fractured and going in different directions. And so there's been a concerted effort since this lawsuit began to make sure that we keep everything together. And I say, whatever shortage, you may say, wow, water resource, we only have one lawyer, and forestry, fire, and state lands got 4. It's a collective effort. We're sharing with each other, and that one lawyer is just to make sure that everything is square with your individual interests and working through those issues. All right, thank you.
And that's all we had for you,
All right,
Madam Chair.
thank you. All right, well, I guess I'd be looking for the final motion then. All right. Is there a second? I don't know if there needs to be a second. I see a second down there. All in favor? Aye. All right, let's go. Lunch upstairs? All right, excellent. And Dana and Randy, we'll see you back at 1 o'clock.